Several years ago, I want to say 2016, something like that, I found myself unemployed and depressed. And I was scrolling through YouTube because what else would someone who is unemployed and depressed do? Dishes? Laundry? Heck no. I don't know how I came across the video, but it caught my attention right away. And I don't even know why it caught my attention right away because it didn't really have a big, flashy hook to reel you in. But it was a video of a clinic teaching counseling therapists and horse people how to incorporate horses into their counseling businesses. And it was fascinating. See, I have always loved horses. In fact, in grade 1, and this was in the 1800s, I think, there was a small book series in my school library featuring a horse named Blaze. I don't know what the stories were about, but that book began my love of horses. Then I was, just graduating high school. I picked up a summer job at a summer camp not far from my home, and they had horses. I was a camp counselor, and I got to ride the horses with the kids. And after that first summer, I determined that I was coming back the next year. I didn't care about money for university and college and all of that. I was coming back to the camp. $25 a week, woohoo! I went back the following summer. They had this great way of allowing counselors to actually learn horseback riding with the kids and the theory and all the stuff, so that if we wanted to, as counselors, we could qualify to be a horse instructor. Oh yeah, I did that. And the following year, I was a horsemanship instructor. It was one of my favorite jobs. I remember probably in August, and we'd already gone through 6 weeks of a very hot summer. I was exhausted, filthy with sand covering me from head to toe, and I think I had mostly lost my voice. I was standing in the middle of a blazing hot arena, calling out to kids, walk your horses, circle your horses, keep Dakota away from Pal, they don't like each other. But I remember thinking, oh Lord, if I could do this for the rest of my life, that would be the job for me. I had always loved horses. Now, between that summer job and about 5 years ago, there really wasn't much of horses in my life at all, but I still loved horses. There's something about them, So when I saw this video on YouTube, I thought, oh, hey, now that looks interesting. How could I do that? But with kids. I don't really care if adults have problems, but kids, I like kids. Kids are cool. How can I do this? And I started looking it up and researching. How does one get a job doing this? How does one qualify to do this? And it turns out that my local college, where I was living at the time, had a program, Child and Youth Care, accelerated version. And they crammed 3 years into one for people who had already had a previous degree, which I did. So I got into that program. And in the first or second week, the coordinator for the program asked us about what we were hoping for in placement for the following summer. Just looking for some ideas, and I raised my hand and explained the video that I'd seen, and I'd really love to do something like equine therapy. And she says, oh, we have a professor on staff that does that. And actually, he's going to be one of your instructors in second term. Would you believe me if I told you it was one of the guys in that video that I had watched? And he was going to be my instructor, and the plan was he was going to be my placement supervisor. So as soon as second term started, he and I connected, and he invited me to come to his farm and begin my placement. And he said that I'm more than welcome to get some hours going in the winter term so that there wouldn't be so much pressure in the summer. So I did. I think I had, 3 or 4 weekends where I was able to go down to his farm, watch him interact with some kids and teenagers using a horse. He would set the teenager to a task with the horse and say, want you to take the horse, and you can use any of the things in the activity bucket, but no lead rope, no halter. I want you to take that horse around that pylon down at the end of the arena. And while the kid was trying to figure out how to do that, he would turn to me and say, okay, now, what we're watching for is this and this and this. Oh, did you see that? Oh, did you see what the horse did there? How would you interpret that? And it was really amazing. It was quite remarkable. And I thought, oh, heck, I'm going to like this. But then COVID. And we didn't do our placement. Urgh. So during the summer of 2020, I thought, all right, I finished my child and youth care diploma. And on the honor roll, I might add, this old lady still got it. But what am I going to do? I really liked the idea of using horses with therapy. But I didn't get the placement, and I didn't get the mentoring as much as I'd wanted to. But then I figured, at some point, someone was just doing their therapy and happened to find out that horses can integrate into this. And at some point, somebody was the first one to do it. And they didn't have qualifications, and they didn't have a mentor, and they learned it on their own, and probably mistakes were made, but they kept going. And I thought, I'm going to do just that. So first, I needed to get a horse. But also, I needed to find a place for the horse because we lived in town, and my neighbors would probably not appreciate horse manure in my backyard. So I put a post on Facebook in town, the rant and rave kind, and said, I'm looking for a place to board a horse. Someone answered me right that day. We're just moving into town, and we could probably help you out, but are you able to wait for 2 weeks? Well, yeah, I could wait for 2 weeks. So then we met up, and turns out it was only 5 minutes from my house, so that was perfect. I told the lady what I was planning. She showed me around her farm and showed me the facilities, and I thought, oh, this is awesome. She told me how much it would be, and I thought, okay, that's what I was expecting. And then she asked me, do you have a horse? And I said, no. But, I've been looking for one, but I need just the right horse with a good temperament to, She goes, I think I know where we can get you a horse. I'll get in contact with you tomorrow. And she did. She texted me the next day, and it was 5 minutes from my house in the other direction. So I went and met this other lady, and I met Annie. Annie was a broodmare. She had been used her entire life to make baby horses. By the time she was 18, she'd had 12 foals. And I figure it had to be pretty much back-to-back pregnancies. Yeah. Not by this lady that I was talking to. She had gotten Annie from her original owner. But Annie was retiring. She couldn't be used as a broodmare anymore. And if you like her, she's yours for free. Free. I was just given a horse. You could have blown me over with a feather. Annie was beautiful. I had to wait till the end of that month, and that could not come fast enough. But the day came, and we brought Annie to the farm. And the first thing she did was take a lap. She ran. She was so beautiful. And over the course of the following 2 years, I had dozens of kids that came to the program. I offered a few workshops with adults and kids. Eventually, we bought our own little place. I call it a snack-size farm because it's only 2 acres, but it was just enough. Annie didn't have a mean bone in her body. She was so kind. She was so gentle. I had one little girl. She was 6 years old when she first started coming out. Loved braiding Annie's tail and mane. And if you know anything about horses, you shouldn't stand right behind a horse. But this little girl would stand right behind Annie and braid her tail. And Annie would just sit there so calmly and let this little girl braid her hair 100 times. And we talked about life. I had one young lady who was really depressed. And she came, met Annie, and we had a few sessions together. Now, one of the things that my mentor had said was silence is really okay, especially when the horse comes between you and your client. Just shut up and let the process happen. And Annie did that one day with this young lady. We were brushing Annie, and Annie stepped between me and this other girl. And I stopped, and I just watched. This young lady was about 21 or 22. She'd been brushing out her mane and her neck, and then it just got quiet. And I could hear her talking ever so quietly to Annie. And then Annie turned her head to this girl and gave her a little nudge. That was all. And the two of them just had a moment. She was holding Annie's head and stroking her head, and I just let it happen, and then it was over. And we went on brushing Annie. And I said, "Hey, what happened there?" "Oh, I don't know." I said, "Well, if Annie could talk, what do you think she was saying to you? Because you guys were in your own world there." And she says, "You know what? Annie was telling me things are going to be okay, and I'm going to make it." And the week later, the girl came back and she said, "I've had a great week." And she says, "I just kept thinking about Annie telling me it's going to be okay." And I said, "That's very cool." And we spent that hour talking, some trivial things, some not so trivial. And she came back one more week and she says, "No, you know what? I think I'm through the crisis. I think I'm good." "Well, you can come back anytime if it gets dark again." She says, "Okay, that's a deal." And that was Annie. Annie would just have a quiet moment with young adults, kids. It was almost like she was talking to them. But then Annie started losing weight. I gave her more food, and it seemed like no matter how much hay I gave her, I just couldn't put weight on her. She was never ridden, so it wasn't like she was getting too much exercise or something. And one day my oldest said to me, "Mom, I think we need to consider that maybe Annie's got cancer." And I had to consider that. Because not only was she not putting on weight, she was losing weight. She would eat nonstop. There wasn't a blade of grass that was longer than an inch, and yet she looked emaciated. She looked like I hadn't fed her in months. I showed a picture to a friend of mine who was a vet tech, and my friend said, "Oh, I think you may need to make that decision sooner than later." It was such a hard decision to make. I've had to make that decision for dogs and cats before, but nothing prepared me for putting down a horse. I called the vet and we made arrangements. I had another horse, Candy, who was older, and about the same time that I had made the decision, Candy's body started shutting down as well. And she began just dying of old age. And I realized I'm putting both horses down. I sobbed like a baby, ugly crying. I told my husband, you go and walk the vet back to the truck and get the bill. I can't do it. Later, he told me that the vet had said that just looking at Annie, she thinks Annie had a very large tumor. She was 25 and a good age. I had her for 5 short years. I really was hoping to have her for so much longer. When I've had to put down other pets, I've done a video or enlarged a picture or something as a memorial, you know. And I started to make a video of different clips of Annie, but I don't know, it didn't work. It wasn't right. And I was scrolling through Pinterest and I saw this project and thought, there it is. That is what I'm making. I didn't quite get the right shape of her blaze. I missed a few places, but it's pretty close. And when I look at it, it's definitely Annie. I desperately hope that there is a heaven where horses and dogs and cats that we've loved are running pain-free with all the hay and green grass and food that they could ever want. I'll get another horse someday and hopefully this year get my program running again. But Annie set the bar high. The next horse I'll have to work hard to be as good as Annie. I'll love the horse, but it will always be compared to Annie, you know. Thanks for watching. I know it's been a sob story, and I'm sorry about that. My next video will be a happier video, I promise. Until then, take care. Rest in peace, Annie. I will love you forever.